Hi everyone, Bandanner here. Welcome to this week's WARNO Dev Blog, and today's a good one. It's the new Army General preview for the Frankfurt Axis. Starting today, we're taking a look at the upcoming Army General campaigns, which will be featured in WARNO's launch out of early access. We have divided the 4 campaigns into 2 pairs, following the 2 different axes of attack for our fictional World War III in West Germany. In today's post, we'll detail the Frankfurt Axis, which contains both the Fulda Gap and Highway 66 campaigns, and Bruderkrieg, but this one's already out in the wild, obviously. Their next subheading is the Frankfurt Axis. As you know, WARNO will feature 5 Army General campaigns at launch, all set in West Germany during the first couple of days of the Warsaw Pact invasion. These could be divided into either the Frankfurt Axis or the Kassel Axis. One of the campaigns, Bruderkrieg, has already launched, part of the Frankfurt Axis itself. Chronologically, Kassel will go first in the airborne assault campaign before we transfer the action to Frankfurt with Fulda Gap and Bruderkrieg. We will return to Kassel before finishing after a week of hard fighting with the colossal Highway 66. Be warned that some of these Army General campaigns are massive in scale and will take many hours to complete. Of course, you can play these campaigns in whatever order you prefer and across both sides, whether in single player or online, in versus or cooperatively. Note that each Army General campaign will feature its own set of strategic options, chiefly about which unit and formation to deploy. We highlight a few examples in each section. The next subheading is the Fulda Gap. The famous Fulda Gap, they say. What Cold War source about potential World War III conflict was not written about this location? Due to the constricted terrain in its part of West Germany, the actual axis of advance would be narrow, with the offensive corridor running through the Kinzig Valley. I've put their intro video on in the background for the time being, though I have turned down the sound in case any of it's copyrighted. Anyhow, the Fulda Gap Army General campaign centers on the initial Warsaw Pact's assault on Fulda, including their efforts to break out of the valley. The Soviets' overarching objective on this part of the front is Frankfurt am Main, a key logistical hub and military target, housing the American 5th Corps HQ. The immediate aim of the campaign is to breach the NATO defenses around Fulda, enter the Kinzig Valley, and break out towards Frankfurt. In the Fulda Gap, you will see the full might of the Soviet 8th Guards Army arrayed against a light screen of American and West German forces. You might have guessed, and you guessed right, the biggest among these troops is the 11th Armoured Cavalry Regiment, manning posts such as the infamous OP Alpha. With devastating air attacks, continuous artillery bombardments, and wave after wave of Soviet motorized riflemen, the NATO defenses must be pried open. Warsaw Pact's tank divisions will exploit the success and use their mobility and firepower to tear through NATO's rear areas. In Fulda Gap, both sides race against time, as the longer NATO can resist, the more reinforcements can be brought to shore up its defenses. On the other hand, the Warsaw Pact's war plans underline the critical importance of speed and initiative in their attempt to break out of the Kinzig Valley. Getting bogged down in the frontier would be considered a disastrous failure. The next subheading is the Fulda Gap Insights. In the campaign, NATO's battalions are clearly outnumbered, yet remember that the 11th ACR squadrons are each worth a small brigade and can beat back several enemy attacks, even by numerically superior forces. The American cavalryman's Achilles' heel is fatigue, however. They might win a few fights, but they'll end up spent and unable to continue to do battle. You must preserve them as much as possible. Fight only the good fight, even if you can win more. By chance, a few of the forward NATO battalions, whether West German or American, are close enough to support the ACR squadrons or replace them on the line if needed. And that's obviously besides the additional reinforcements they are rushing to the front. In some instances, you'll be able to select which fresh units you want to deploy, including Green Berets from the 1-10th Special Forces Group. Although the 11th ACR will have to prevent the enemy from reaching Frankfurt, you can trade some space for time. If you must fall back, it would be suicide to try and hold the Soviet army at the Fulda-Bad Hersfeld line. You know, the silly things that I've been trying to do in my NATO campaign on Bruderkrieg. Don't do that, it gets your stuff killed. Okay, we've heard about NATO, what about the Soviets? Well, for the Warsaw Pact, the numbers are in your favour, but a tight schedule hamstrings you. Your superiors are breathing down your neck to make sure you don't fall behind on the Operation Strict timetable. You can choose your combat units from the start, forming your strategy to overcome NATO's defences in the Fulda Gap. For example, you can select the 21st Independent Flame Battalion with its Buratino and TO-55 to immolate NATO resistance at close range, or opt for the powerful 303rd Guards Artillery Brigade instead if that's more your thing. If you can't break NATO's resolve, further reinforcements will come at a cost. Time is of the essence and losses are irrelevant. Don't let NATO delay you too long, especially the 11th ACR. Crush the Americans quickly, even if it will cost you dearly. If you don't achieve a breakthrough, reinforcing NATO units will undoubtedly hamper or even halt your advance through the Kinzig Valley. Okay, that's everything for the Fulda Gap campaign. What about now the Highway 66 campaign? Let's skip ahead a couple of days of very tough fighting. When we return to the Frankfurt-Fulda axis, a week later, World War III is well underway. Highway 66 is a massive showdown on the Centag front. Both sides will have access to a large number of units and formations spread out across the map that stretches from Bad Hersfeld in the north, Fulda in the middle, and Würzburg in the south. The Soviet offensive through the Fulda Gap has penetrated far through the Kinzig Valley along the Autobahn 66. However, the communist forces failed to seize Frankfurt, being held at the gates by a solidifying defense of American and West German forces. A deadly stalemate has descended on the front. One more push by the Soviet 8th Guards Army will be made to seize Frankfurt, throwing the last Warsaw Pact reserves into combat. However, NATO is stronger than ever, with elements of the US 5th Corps and the 7th Corps backed by part of the Bundeswehr 3 Corps getting ready to take the fight to the enemy. Powerful NATO forces are concentrated on the flanks, choosing to attack north or south of Frankfurt. This means that Highway 66 is by far the largest Army General campaign in WARNO. Furthermore, it is the culmination of all of Centag's campaigns that came before, with commanders able to play out their own strategy to achieve victory. NATO has a chance of success attacking over the flanks, while the Warsaw Pact can strike in one massive push through Hanau and seize Frankfurt with a full frontal attack. The next subheading is Highway 66 Insights. This is the big one. Highway 66 lets you play through with most of NATO's US 5th and 7th Corps and the West German 3rd Corps plus other elements versus the whole Soviet 8th Guards Army and East German 3rd Army. Many of the battalions have already engaged in opening phases of the campaign, featured in the Fulda Gap and various WARNO operations, and are now a shadow of their former selves. Battalions of the Soviet Vanguard divisions and most of the US 5th Corps start the campaign with losses, depleted units, and some fatigue. Aside from the size of Highway 66, the first turn of the campaign allows you to plan the axis of your main thrust. This, they say, increases the replayability, especially online versus players of flesh and blood. So, where does the main blow land is the next subheading. NATO receives the US 1st Armored Division from the 7th Corps. You can choose where to deploy it when the formation becomes available. An option, for example, is Militenberg behind the main battle line, which can be used as a reserve to reinforce or even counterattack the center. However, it might encounter some of the Soviet Army's strongest units, or select Würzburg at the extreme right of your front. While a more isolated location, it is still a good place to strike the Soviet 8th Guards Army line of communications, defended by weaker units, but that will leave your battle-weary center to fend for itself. On the other side, for the Warsaw Pact, you have a choice to deploy the National Volksarmy 7 Panzer Division, the last fresh armoured reserve. It can be posted on the right flank, the shortest way to getting into combat, where the West and East Germans are still fighting for control over Alsfeld, aka the Bruderkrieg campaign, or deploy them more centrally near Fulda, where they will have to travel but have more flexibility in which part of the front they can reinforce. Unlike the Fulda Gap, which has an attacking and defending side, Highway 66 will be a head-on clash, with the choice of where to attack left to the player. The Soviet 8th Guards Army's momentum is almost spent, but it can still throw its remaining reserves into a last assault on seizing its objective. Meanwhile, NATO's first units in action have taken horrible casualties and are close to breaking point. However, the more fresh troops are poised to reach the front. This is the tipping point of the Fulda campaign, but which side will be victorious? And then last they have a little subheading, a Chieftain Rework. Apart from all these glorious tidbits on WARNO's Army General, some other news as well, we have been reworking the Chieftain Mark 9 model. Currently it is a reskinned Mark 10 model, despite the turret having a different shape from the earlier version due to the lack of steel blue armour. Not happy with this oversight, we have redone the Mark 9 model complete with a new texture and markings to be shipped in WARNO's next update. Always nice to see the models getting a little update. And that is everything for this week's devblog. Thank you for joining me, everyone. Please do like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all soon for some more WARNO.